Andrew, I just wanted to ask you a few questions
Okay.
about urban tree species and the kinds of spaces that we need to grow them in. Can you just share a few thoughts about the constraints that you saw in the 40% challenge? Obviously, I had trouble fitting in all those trees. There were things were tight. What kinds of space suggestions do you have, and reality checks do you have for us?
In most cases, it's really below ground. Our limitations with regards to how things are currently built, and of course with infill, we're losing a lot of potting space, for lack of a better word. Trees need a certain cubic volume of soil to grow, obviously, and the bigger the tree, the more volume. So in doing the 40% challenge, that's what I was looking for. I mean, keeping in mind power lines and above ground obstructions and so on. I was looking for larger trees that have the soil volume to allow them to grow to their ultimate size.
And then any starting thoughts for us about what kinds of species we are envisioning when we do these kinds of exercises?
Well, as mentioned just now, in terms of the tree giveaway, it's native and naturalized is the preferable species. We've gotten into trouble with the ubiquitous Norway maple as an example. A champion tree, it will grow anywhere, but it's got many downfalls. So we're going to try to stick away from those and keep with the natives, but they need more particular growing spaces. So that's our challenge.
Okay. All right, thanks, Andrew.
So as Carolyn mentioned, then we'll be focusing more on actual, what trees, like tree species and tree sizes and ages. So just to start, in the case of, we saw that fitting all the trees in was a difficult exercise, although many in our group did it. In terms of small trees, in sort of the under wires constraint that we had there, what kind of options are available?
Well, more frequently than not, you find a lot of fruit trees, Paul. So crab apples, they become an issue with fruit, obviously. There's some sterile varieties out there. More frequently, though, you'll see people planting service berries, which is a great tree, native, and does have fruit, but relatively small, at least compared to crab apples and of course true apples. And something that the city is planting, I've noticed, is hawthorn. You can get thornless hawthorn. So nice species. It's native without the thorns, of course. It's a safe tree, and smaller growing underlines. Other species like amber maples, the knock against it is that it's invasive. It's a great tree. It's great fall colors, doesn't grow too tall, underlines and so on. But the knock against that, as I'm sure you're aware, is that it's an invasive species. So that and Japanese tree lilac, probably overplanted at this point, but another great species.
Right. With the Japanese lilac, I know there's a lot all along the Rideau River there, right in the neighborhood that we're talking about. Is it an invasive species, or is it something that we should plant?
Yeah, it's not invasive. You're thinking of maybe vulgaris, the common lilac, which spreads via root sprouts and right. Can be invasive, but not the tree lilac, reticulata.
Yeah. So in the case of so that's like in terms of when you got obstacles above your head. Mm-hmm. When we've got obstacles below ground, with underground services, does that automatically rule out any planting, or are there any options there?
I wouldn't say that it rules out anything. It comes to bear down the road when whatever is below ground needs to be repaired or dug up, and then you have your issues, because you have those roots which are obviously grown in and around whatever's below ground. And for larger growing trees that are close by, obviously there's a lot of root loss as a result of the trenching that needs to occur. So it's not, it's a longer term issue in terms of below ground in relation to a planted tree. Big issue now, of course, with infill is that we have mature trees And for argument's sake, we have semi-detached going in, which you typically require two surface trenches, and that go into the through the root zone, the critical rooting zone of those mature trees. So that's a very frequent conflict that I deal with anyway.
Right. But in terms of replacements, then, though, there would be no necessary constraint to species taking into account the fact that there's underground services.
Not directly, no. Again, it's to the future. So I think I may have mentioned last week, species that are taprooted. So juglans, the walnuts, butternuts, the oak species, Quercus, they tend to have less, at least at the early stages of their lives, of say the first 50 years or so, because they have a more downward root growth. So as a result, lateral issues are less of a problem.
Right. So these would actually, like, just in general, like how far down would these basically go before really spreading out, these types of species, in terms of the root system?
Well, depending on your proximity to the tree. So closer to the tree, the deeper are the roots. You have anchoring roots, roots that literally anchor the tree to the face of the planet type thing. But the surface feeding roots are up further from the tree, are up very high in the soil profile. They need to capture moisture. And through precipitation, you'll have that just going down, say, 12 inches or so before it's drawn back up. So
Right.
further from the tree, the roots are higher. But in terms of the oaks and so on, the taprooted species, which head, their idea anyway is to head for the water table, they'll go down several meters first and then start to grow laterally as the tree ages. So that's where you can get away with things with taprooted species in
Right.
terms of trenches and conflicts with underground obstructions.
Interesting. The we're talking about individual trees now, but when we're looking at a neighborhood, in a way, we're looking at a population of trees, and I guess there's interest in having a certain age distribution of trees in that neighborhood, just to promote that there's always something available at a certain size, at a certain height. Um, in terms of planting and planting plans, um, there's some fast growing trees, there's slower growing trees. Like how could we try and ensure this kind of mixed population that gives us optimal cover?
Well, the issue around fast growing trees is that they're always fast growing. So I'm sure most people today are aware of silver maples. In theory, nothing wrong. Native, fast growing, maple, all good, except that they keep on growing and keep on growing fast. And as most of us are aware, very large. And so we start to get into the conflicts, just as you've mentioned, Paul, with services. Somebody mentioned earlier with foundations. So it's a tricky thing. We want to gain canopy, which silver maples at maturity will certainly have. But the knock against them is that they need the space to grow, which is something we're talking about in terms of the 40% challenge and backyards and available rooting area. But we also have to be mindful of conflicts down the road. And with silver maples, truly you have the potential for conflict both above ground in terms of that canopy spread and below ground in terms of that aggressive root growth. The water pipes, as someone mentioned earlier, are classic example with silver maples and potential conflicts. So it's a balance of something that grows large, but it doesn't grow so large or so quickly that it causes problems.
So any idea like species that would sort of fit that range?
Well, what they've done, and I'm sure once again a lot of people are aware of the Freeman maple. So that's a cross between our native red and native silver. So it has the fall colors as red does, for instance, but it also has some of the tendencies of silver in terms of the aggressive growth and the fast growth rate. But that's tempered by the fact that it's been crossed with red, which is a slower growing, more sensitive species. So as one example, and that's been planted a lot as well because of the nice balance it has, and maybe overplanted. But that's one good example of a species of tree that kind of seems to touch on both things that we want: faster growing, a broad crown at maturity, but native at the same time. So it's a difficult balance.
So we're talking canopy today a lot, and it always makes me feel sad for the conifers. And what's your view on the role of conifers in this whole plan of greening a neighborhood?
In one word, underutilized. I've been part of a number of initiatives and have brought up conifers, and have used the fact that white pine is our provincial tree, and so on. For a variety of reasons, they're discounted, and I'm not sure why. They don't provide the canopy that we think of. I suppose one example would be a white pine at maturity does hold a good sized crown, but in many cases, for instance, spruce, being tight grown, they don't really provide all that much canopy. But obviously, adding conifers to the mix in terms of diversity is a good idea, and year-round crowns, given that they're evergreens. So yeah, underutilized. Even some interesting species, ones that are definitely underutilized, are the larch family. They should be planted more, and for the life of me, I can't figure out why not. But really interesting the fact that, of course, they shed their needles each fall, and in many cases, the species, they're a glorious golden color, so they really add color to the fall display.
So you're on Team Conifer then, we
I
think.
am, and I'm glad you brought that up.
Okay. Uh, Rosaline, I don't know. I think we've got a time budget, and people are expecting a little break now. So thank you very much, Andrew, for this interesting conversation.
You're welcome.